I wanted to start this off. I've been wondering about this, and we've talked about it, and that is the role of community arts. I mean, if you go around America, you find that every community, every urban center, every rural center has got something called a center for the arts, by any other name. I mean, there are all kinds of big arts. Art is you. We are art. You know, we all have our little publications and websites. What is the value of that kind of thing?
I think there's tremendous value. It's the sort of thing that I think there's been a lot of discussion about in recent years, both in terms of economic development by people like the author, sociologist Richard Florida, who defines creative communities as kind of the core of viable communities in America today. And I think there's that on the broad scale, and also in individual experience. I think it's extremely important to provide people with opportunities to really explore and engage the creative aspects of themselves. And to me, that's what underlies the development of all those places. They exist because they're needed.
Yeah, well, does the need come out of the community? Like, people, is there kind of a groundswell of demand for, hey, we need a center, we need people who can mentor us, we need supplies, we need we need our own program, which for me sort of segues into the question: is there an artist, well hidden in all of us, and we just need the right opportunity to blossom?
There may not be a great artist hidden in all of us, but I think there's a creative impulse in all of us. And I think it comes out in a lot of sometimes slant ways. It seems to me people always find a way to be creative. There's a wonderful poet from Troy, our hometown, Alice Fulton, who is a MacArthur genius and wonderful, much honored poet. And many of her poems are set in the Troy of her youth and girlhood, and some touch on aspects of the city's working class roots and its less than sophisticated aspects. And she has some wonderful poems about the way people in South Troy decorate their houses for Christmas.
And keep them decorated all year.
And keep them decorated. But it can be garish. It can be in a way that we might not find real sophisticated, but it grows out of an impulse to beautify. And I think people have that, and they want to make something with their own hands, and they want to paint something on their van or their motorcycle, whatever it is. People want to find a way to bring beauty and interest to their environments. So I think that, and in the writing community, and we've seen this in the capital region, but I think it's mirrored in every community in America. If there aren't natural outlets, people create them. Poets and writers come together and form groups to workshop one another's stuff, to bring in other writers to share their work with the community. There's, we live in a region where there's an incredibly vital writing community, and a lot of really fine writers have both emerged from it or come to be a part of it.
Is there some kind of goal? You were talking about sophistication and then the impulse to beautify. I love that line, and its relationship to the academy, where we formalize creativity. We have courses, we have professors, we have credits. So we give sort of diplomas and licenses and MFAs and BFAs and all this stuff, and it's really important to us. Where's that crossover between the community art sense and the thing you're talking about, the Alice Fulton sort of ground roots thing to decorate your house for Christmas without taking a course in lighting, and the course in lighting? where, you know, somebody signs up for a course and we go through all kinds of, you know, creative ways to make your house look better. I mean, even HGTV, in a sense, is some kind of a weird spin-off of this thing you're talking about, the impulse to beautify. And how do we look at a room? How do we look at a house? You know, how do we see ourselves in a space, which may get us to what is your sense of place, and how does a writer get to that? I mean, what is that about?
To me, I think part of the answer, and I don't know that I know of any fixed truths, but part of the answer is that there are, for some people, experiences that drive them to an understanding that this thing they're trying to do, whether it's write a poem or paint a picture or whatever, or decorate their house or their garden, that there is a long and rich history of people having tried to do that before, and certain things have been learned and certain techniques have been codified to some extent, but at least accepted as having some importance for structuring the way we go about doing something. And for those people, I think there's a chance to kind of ratchet it up a bit and move into a formal education setting. Or in the case of some of those art centers around the country, many of them are teaching places as well, where they offer some really vital interchange with serious working artists as teachers, and do it without the need to amass credits or get credentialed in some sense.
Right.
I think my ideal would be that both exist, and that both exist in a tone of acceptance and respect for one another. That, you know, I think there's a danger in the academy to look down on what's seen as less serious artistic effort.
That sort of professional amateur
yes.
dichotomy, that conflict, what that's all about.
And I think an awful lot of really wonderful work has come from people who never set foot in the academy. So, you know, I think we need to understand that as well. Certainly there's a lot to be learned from an academic education. But I think if you're an artist, you're going to be an artist with or without an MFA. And if you're a great artist, you're going to be a great artist with or without an MFA. If you're not a good artist, an MFA ain't going to help. So, I think we need to understand that there are different paths.
Might help you get a job.
Might help you get a job,
which
right.
is always important. In your own life, it seems to me that you've taken what a lot of people would say are crazy risks. You know, you've moved to other places. For instance, we were talking about your time spent in Little Rock, Arkansas during the Clinton administration, and
right.
people say, well, what are you doing there? I mean, that's a community that's already set up. Where are you going to fit in, you know, when you go to a new place? But that's American too, isn't it? That movement, that getting out on the road, that sort of following your nose. Are creative people like you more prone to doing things like that without really...
I don't know. I mean, I've seen statistics that suggest a lot of people do it at fairly regular intervals these days. That, the lifetime career is not necessarily the model we live with anymore. But, I can't claim to have ever plotted a career. I heard somebody say recently, a writer at a book signing at a Barnes and Nobles talked about his accidental path to becoming a novelist at age 60 or something, after careers in television and advertising. And he said that he posited, would you, if you were trying to figure out what to do in midlife, would you go ask an 18-year-old to make the decision for you? Then he said, well, who made it in the first place?
Right.
So, I think I've kind of stumbled and bumbled from one thing to another, all having to do in some way with writing. and most having to do in some way with the arts. I found myself in Little Rock, Arkansas, because there was a wonderful repertory theater there that asked me to come down and put together a fundraising roast of their native daughter, Mary Steenburgen, the actress. And I did. And then I ended up staying on for a while with the Rap, and subsequently with a paper in Little Rock as a journalist. And it was wonderful for me to discover a different culture. It was also, I think, really stimulating as a writer. I wrote a lot of poetry when I had to deal with that dislocation of being a place very different. We've talked before about the fact that, if you're in a familiar place, you don't have to, it's very comfortable. I knew in Albany where to get my car fixed, or a plumber to call, or where to go to the dry cleaners, those sorts of things, or where to go to hear music or have an artistic experience. I had to discover everything anew, and I think that leads to some heightened and maybe transformed perceptual relationships with the city.
So thematically, how does that play into your work? I mean, let's get into your poetry. I mean, do you think that changing scenarios and having to relearn things sharpens your perception of what's going on, or is there a theme that follows you around and it sort of gets, I mean, we're all who we are no matter where we are, and it's like what do you pick up on, like the themes that you work on?
I think my first answer to that has to be a not very elevated one. When I lived prior to moving to Arkansas, I was working for the organization that later became the Art Center of the Capital Region. It was at that point the Rensselaer County Council on the Arts. And one of my duties there, in addition to a lot of administrative stuff, was to run the literary program. So I was responsible for bringing in guest artists and setting up workshops and readings and working with the local literary community to bring it all together and to kind of promote an interchange, I think, between local writers and visiting writers and audiences. So, and that was a great toy for me. I loved it, and I got to have lots of dinners with heroes and spend a lot of really interesting and exciting time with people that I really admired. And as I was doing that, I wrote very little. When I was separated from that and moved to Little Rock, I think I had to write because nobody was writing for me anymore. I was having this vicarious experience with whomever, John Barth and Joyce Carol Oates, and and a lot of the local writers we have here. And absent that, I think I had to go back to writing my own stuff. So it's not a very...
Is it a way for you not to be lonely, or not to be entertained, or it's the inner eye that opens and you have to express certain things?
I think it's a way to find connection, certainly. I don't know about lonely, but...
You're imparting beauty to certain things.
Yeah. And also, I think in that case, I mean, I continue to write now, and I don't have that sort of sense of dislocation. But in that case, I think it was a matter of having given up not only my connection to the writing community, but access to the writing community. There weren't. It was exceptional when Yusef Komanyaka came to Little Rock, or Philip Levine. Those things happened once a year. Here they happen once a week.
Yeah.
And I felt cut off in that way as a consumer of culture too. I didn't have the New York City Ballet and the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Boston Symphony, all within reach of me. And I think that some of that was finding a place for my cultural interests.